we made it to another Friday. Welcome to Week in Review. I'm Bill Radke. Every Friday, we sort through the news with a panel of local journalists. And today, I'm sitting in my bedroom looking at a computer screen and seeing Chase Burns, digital editor at The Stranger, David Kroman, staff reporter at Crosscut, and Monica Nickelsburg, civic editor at GeekWire. Hi, everybody. Thanks for doing it.
Thanks, Bill.
Hey.
We have more than 6,500 confirmed COVID-19 cases in this state, many more unconfirmed. More than 270 people have died. Last night, Governor Inslee extended the statewide stay-at-home order for another 4 weeks through May 4th.
So here's basically why we're doing this. We unfortunately have yet to see the full weight of this virus in our state. This order is not only justified, it is morally necessary. We are confident in our steps we have taken, but we cannot lose steam in the middle of this fight.
David Kroman, the governor says we haven't seen the full weight of this virus. Are we at least flattening that curve?
At least in the sort of Puget Sound region, it seems like we are flattening the curve, and we certainly haven't seen the sort of exponential increases that places like New York or Italy have seen. But what I think he means by we haven't seen the full weight of it yet, I mean, there's some modeling out of the University of Washington that shows the peak of this will probably hit Washington in kind of mid-April. The exact days seem to shift depending on new data, but sometime in mid-April, the peak will hit. And then, you know, he showed some positive signs of us flattening the curve, but at the same time, the number of COVID-19 tests that are coming back positive, the percentage is increasing. So I think for a while there, it was like maybe 8 or 9% of the tests coming back were coming back positive. That's gotten up to around 14% in Washington state. So there are positive signs, but at the same time, there are clear indications that if the efforts we're doing now are rolled back, it could come back pretty quickly and pretty forcefully.
David, are you referring to the UW Institute of Health Metrics and Evaluation model? Because I've seen that model showing what would happen if social distancing measures keep going and work, and it was sort of reassuring that Washington State would have enough beds and ICU beds and ventilators, and some critics said that's too rosy a picture because it might encourage us to ease up on restrictions and preparations.
Well, I mean, it's too rosy of a picture if you ignore the fact that it includes a pretty wide margin of error in their own modeling. So, I mean, they've caveated it. I mean, and they update the data literally every single day. I mean, that's why I'm not going to say exactly when the peak is supposed to be, because I haven't looked at what it says in the last couple hours. I mean, I talked to one of the people who was involved in that project, and you know, they're fully aware that people are going to sort of look to these dates that they're throwing out and maybe take them literally, and so they're trying to update it constantly. You know, maybe the hospital numbers do look better for us than it does in other states, but this thing could turn south pretty quickly at the same time, and so yeah, I don't think it's a sign that we're out of the woods.
Has anyone seen that the New York Times used cell phone location data and found that the average distance traveled in Seattle has fallen from 3.8 miles in late February to 61 feet?
Did see that, yeah, which is like it barely even a walk, really. You know, we're still allowed to walk around our neighborhoods.
Yeah, I think that might just be me because I've just been walking down the block to the grocery store and back to my house, and I have not really left in, it feels like a month.
Right. That could just be the Chase Burns effect. I mean, the distance also tends to correlate to income, of course. It's a privilege in most cases to stay home and telecommute and order your groceries, et cetera.
We're also in a, you know, I'm sure Monica could speak to this, but we're also in a very tech-heavy city, and tech is much more well-positioned to tell all of its workers to go home, as Amazon, Microsoft, a lot of the big companies did very quickly and very early on. So I think the industry of Seattle is probably more well suited. I think I saw a comparison to maybe it was Jacksonville or something in Florida, which is not as much of a tech heavy city, obviously. So I think Seattle is just kind of well suited for making that quick turn of people being able to just putter around their kitchen instead of commuting to work.
Right. And we're not as dense as a city like New York. So it's also, there's, more physical distance between us and other people. I've seen some, like you said, some theories that the reason Seattle hasn't had that exponential jump in cases, even though we had the first reported case and it was circulating in the community for a long time, is that as soon as we started to really understand the severity of this, thousands of workers were able to really quickly pivot to working from home.
Chase, when it comes to who is essential, what businesses can be open, the governor this week clarified that, because we already know about grocery stores, takeout and delivered food, pharmacies, gas stations. Can you tell us some of what the governor clarified about who's essential and who's not?
Yeah, so Governor Inslee updated the list of businesses that are considered essential under his stay home, stay healthy order. And obviously, like you said, grocery stores, pharmacies, even pot shops, those are allowed to stay open. But there was also some clarifications. So like nannies taking care of kids whose parents still have to go to work. They're essential workers. Commercial fisheries, gooey duck fisheries, those are also essential workers. But there's also some areas that are still up for interpretation. So outdoor maintenance is considered essential, but only if it's for like emergency repairs or like imminent damage. And moving companies are essential, but only if it's to fulfill contracts that were sort of already established or to sort of get vulnerable people into safer housing. So obviously, with some of these cases, there's a little bit of flexibility. Like, how do we know that a moving company is moving a vulnerable person? Even like tobacco shops are considered essential, but only if they sell food. So there's a lot of like caveats to this that are sort of tricky to navigate for some companies.
Right. You can sell cars if the sale is to replace a car that's damaged or totaled, because people might need their cars, but you're not supposed to make a non-essential car sale, and it just gets that tricky, vague.
Yeah, and so we're essentially relying on people to do, at this point, voluntary compliance. So the Attorney General, Bob Ferguson, said that they're relying on 100% voluntary compliance at this point. His office will deliver warnings and pursue charges if businesses don't comply. But the question is when will that happen? And then also, do we need to take more severe measures? Places like LA, the mayor's threatened to shut off the water and electricity of of non-essential businesses that don't shut down after warnings. In New Orleans, the mayor has threatened to arrest people that are defying the orders. So I think we have to sort of figure out how hard we're gonna push this, and if voluntary compliance is gonna work.
And we're not really enforcing here yet, right? I haven't heard of a business that was staying open that got shut down or sanctioned or anything like that yet.
We're not enforcing that I've seen yet, but there was a press conference, like you mentioned, in which the AG and Inslee said that businesses could lose their licenses, individuals could get citations. It kind of felt like the last warning. He's been doing a lot of last warning press conferences right before the stay home order. There was one kind of like that. So I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see these enforcement measures in the coming days.
KUOW did a story on open businesses that might not sound essential to you. Do you know the Everett company, Funko, that makes and sells collectibles, bobbleheads, and figurines and action figures? And apparently they told workers that, well, we supply, because some workers didn't appreciate having to come to work and be around other people, be exposed. And they told workers that we supply to essential stores. And there are guidelines in Washington State where if you can't separate the essential stuff you sell from the non-essential stuff you sell, you can sell everything.
Well, and there was the luxury yacht repair people, which I think was sort of in that same group, which is the boat repair was, I think, allowed to stay open on the logic that first responders, fire department boats or police department boats might need servicing, but I think it was the Seattle Times camped out outside of the boat launch and saw them, working on a 50-foot yacht or something like that. And so, I mean, yeah, it's and I think, on a sort of different level, I think, people who are in the cleaning industry or something like that, I mean, that's considered essential because they might do deep cleans of a place, but but that also means that some people who normally come to a house or something to do sort of weekly cleanings are still being asked to go in, and that makes them uncomfortable. So there's the breadth of the umbrella that some of this fits under definitely creates for some awkward, trying to delineate between what is actually essential and what is not.
Right. And I don't know that with everything going on, our state and local officials necessarily have the bandwidth to go that granular in their enforcement. So it seems like to me, without singling out any one company, the efficacy of our social distancing measures are going to be a result of the culture of whether people are really thinking about how them going out and interacting with other people puts at risk our healthcare workers or our grocery workers or other people who really, we do need to go out and do their jobs in order for society to function. They're already taking a huge risk, and our interactions elevate that risk. So the best way to support them is to, really consider whether what you're doing is essential. Now, I also understand that's a huge financial hit to these companies, and those decisions can often mean layoffs or, their long-term ability to survive, but we all are making difficult sacrifices right now.
And gun stores have been deemed not essential, right? Although some gun stores are defying that.
Yeah, so gun stores are not essential in Washington State. The White House did put out an order that said, it wasn't an order, the White House said that gun stores are essential, and other states have said that gun stores are essential. But in Washington State, we've said that they aren't. And some, maybe many gun stores have continued to stay open. And there was even a group of sheriffs who sent a letter to Governor Inslee requesting that gun stores remain open, saying that sheriffs and other law enforcement needed the guns to stay open. And obviously this is sort of brought up constitutional issues. People say that it's a constitutional issue not to have their gun store open, but is that necessarily true? A gun store being open or closed is very different than someone taking away your gun. And so this is something that we're going to probably...
I lost Chase's audio. We'll unfreeze him as soon as we can. And David, you've been writing about how the inequity of all of this. Some physicians and scientists and teleworkers make decent money, but a lot of essential grocery clerks and gas station attendants and warehouse workers and bus drivers, et cetera, are not getting well paid for their essentialness, and they're having to ride the buses, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think part of we're seeing that a lot of lower wage jobs are being deemed essential, like we've talked about. But then sort of one side effect of that is if you're not, that puts those people in a very uncomfortable position. I've talked to a lot of people who feel nervous about going in to work, but if they are deemed essential, then it's sort of up to them to either go into work or quit. And if they quit, you don't get unemployment benefits. And so that's a really kind of challenging position for a lot of people because, unemployment has been expanded pretty greatly. And it's actually, if you can kind of get through the initial wall of applications, getting approval for it is fairly easy at this point. But if you're deemed essential and told that you need to come into work every day, you kind of lose out on that.
I want to talk more about the financial hit of all this in a little bit, but before we leave the question of who's essential and who ought to be staying at home, Monica, you've been working on a story about how Bellevue police are enforcing the stay-at-home order.
Yeah, well, they're careful to say that this isn't necessarily an enforcement measure.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Monitoring, I guess.
Monitoring is a good way to put it. The Bellevue Police Department says that 911 lines are really inundated with people calling in and reporting violations of the stay-home order. So they stood up this component of the My Bellevue app and website where folks can report gatherings or things that they view as violating the order in order to clear up the 911 line. That explanation is not necessarily sufficient for some privacy experts and advocates that I spoke with, but that's kind of what the BPD is saying.
What are the privacy advocates worried about? Are they specific about an abuse that they see coming, or is it more general than that?
Yeah, so I spoke with the ACLU of Washington, and their concerns are twofold. One, they don't feel like there's enough transparency about what information is being collected and where it's being stored. And two, the fear is that a tool like this created during a crisis might live on beyond the crisis and be repurposed for other things. During a pandemic or any other crisis, we do tend to sacrifice some of our privacy in order to, for the greater good. But we've seen with events like 9/11, those measures that go in during wartime or during a crisis sometimes live on far beyond the crisis and end up violating individuals' privacy, particularly marginalized or over-surveilled groups.
But we don't know that the people who are being, reported that their personal information is being collected, right? It's just people. Is it people creating a, what do you call that when it's a generalized little red pins, and there's a cluster of too many red pins, and that's it?
I think heat map is what you're looking for.
Heat map, thank you. That's it.
Yeah, so it's a heat map. I think that we don't know exactly. Bellevue says that they're not collecting any data, but you do use your personal account in the app to upload this information.
Well, it's
Any
been
other
wild.
thoughts on
I mean,
that?
some
Yes,
of the
David.
reporting in the New York Times and around movement has all been based on cell phone data. And so it's this really fascinating reporting that gives us a lot of insight into how people are behaving and difference between, low-income workers and higher wage workers and things like that. But the sort of underlying piece of that that's, I think a lot of people hadn't considered, is all of this is based on millions and millions of little dots from cell phone data. So yeah, I mean, it's unnerving. At the same time, I think to a certain extent, people are finding it a helpful tool to understand, what is working. Like if we're trying to limit people's movement, having this data is genuinely sort of useful for people like, the governor to make decisions to see if what they're putting into place is having an effect.
Right. And the cat's kind of out of the bag. I've seen this question of, would you sacrifice some of your privacy to help track this pandemic, to slow it down? And it's a good thought experiment, but posing it as a question, like it's actually a choice, is a little bit too late, because, when it comes to geolocation data, the New York Times, like you said, has done a great job tracking this. That information is just so out there already.
Yeah, you've already sacrificed it.
Yeah.
Chase Burns, your computer has unfrozen you and returned you to the discussion.
Yes.
You are an essential worker. Actually, we are, all of us. I have a piece of paper from the state. How are you journalists feeling about being essential workers?
Well, it's it is tiring and somewhat difficult. As you know, the Stranger is ad-based, and we had to cut a good majority of our staff, actually, when a lot of businesses had to shut down because we lost a lot of revenue. So like many essential workers, I feel like I am sort of confronted with one of the most difficult tasks and problems I've ever had to confront in my job. And simultaneously, I have fewer and fewer resources to do that job. And so obviously it's a struggle, but it's also like, what else would I do if I wasn't doing this? I think I would just be on Twitter following the news anyways.
Right. All right. Well, shall we pause, my essential journalists friends, and take a short break, and we're going to talk some more about the financial implications and Seattle, tech-heavy Seattle in a tech-heavy pandemic. We're going to be right back on the Week in Review with Chase Burns of The Stranger, David Kroman from Crosscut, Monica Nickelsburg from GeekWire, coming back in a moment. I'm Bill Radke. I'm virtually here, looking at my computer screen and seeing local journalists David Kroman, Chase Burns, and Monica Nickelsburg from Crosscut and The Stranger, and from GeekWire. Let's talk about the financial and economic cost a little more of this pandemic. 182,000 first-time jobless benefit claims last week in Washington state, and the peak is yet to come. Our state has temporarily banned evictions and foreclosures for non-payment, but eventually all that back rent and mortgage is going to come due. Are governments going to make whole every renter and borrower and landlord and lender? Is anyone reporting on that?
I don't think anyone's going to come out of this whole. I mean, there's a pretty dramatic expansion of unemployment benefits. In addition to just expanding how many people are eligible for the program, the federal government is going to provide an extra $600 a week for people on unemployment. And then we will theoretically, if you are a tax filer, theoretically get these $1,200 checks to adults. And so I think that is kind of the extent of the effort to make renters and renters whole, at least. People who owe mortgage can have theirs at least sort of temporarily forgiven. They have to pay it eventually, but might be able to put it off for a little while. But no, I mean, I don't think anyone's going to come out of this hole. I think it's going to be, even if and when this virus disappears, it's going to be a big hole to climb out of.
Right. And it's kind of the same on the business front. There are small business loans and grants that companies can be eligible for, but just like the assistance for individuals, it's sort of a relief to part of the problem, but I don't think any of these measures are necessarily going to return our economy to where it was before.
Yeah, and obviously there's a need, I've talked to a lot of renters that there's a sort of immediate need for rent payment relief, and we do have that statewide eviction moratorium, but there's sort of a limit to what our state and local officials can do with sort of rent cancellation plans or rent suspensions, and we run into potential constitutional issues. And so many of our hands are tied, but this is an unprecedented situation. And obviously, we need unprecedented solutions.
Yes,
right. Governor Inslee gave a Twitter Q&A yesterday where he was asked this question several times, and he said that it may not be within his authority to cancel rent and mortgage payments, but that may require an actual legislative solution, which is not immediately available.
Yeah, Seattle's mayor told me yesterday on the show that the government can't break a private contract. Thus the constitutionality, and I guess it's a taking of a kind. So they're looking into that. Regarding the financial pain in this city, one symbol of Seattle's economy is the restaurant mogul, the Seattle restaurateur Tom Douglas. He's shut down almost all of his restaurant empire. And this week on the Seattle Channel's Civic Cocktail, the host Joni Balter asked Tom Douglas, what happens when this pandemic is over and you come back?
I'm not sure you really get it, Joni. It's not like that. It's different now. You don't just come back from this. This cost $3 million just to close my businesses down. Yeah. We are broke. I'm not sure you don't just like, okay, I'm going to open 13 restaurants. It's like, it just doesn't work that way. And so you're asking a question that's untenable. And it is, I hate to force reality on people, but the reality is that it's going to be tough to come back. It's going to be tough for 50% of our restaurants to come back.
And Chase, you were saying that somehow hearing Tom Douglas say that makes it even more real.
Yeah, I mean, it was just sort of surprising to hear Tom Douglas, figure that many people sort of assume is, very successful, would be someone who would be able to come back pretty easily. But the reality is that a lot of businesses run on really tight margins, and, we go away during this pandemic, and the idea is that we're going to come back, and ideally, demand will come back for a lot of these businesses, but you can't just like bring your staff back and not have any funds to pay them for the first few weeks and be like, we hope that people are going to come and we hope that you're going to be able to be paid. So, when we come back and when we come out of this, the world that we see is going to be very different.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on how this it's speculative, but I think it's interesting even now to be asking these questions. There's so many changes wrought by this pandemic, and I wonder how you imagine the Seattle area life might be different afterward. The way we structure things might be different afterward from what it's been like up to now.
I've been thinking a lot about the kind of trauma of this experience for individuals, and I think there's two ways it could possibly go. I mean, one is that we all are so excited to be let out that we go and we try to patronize our favorite local businesses immediately and see people and, really reestablish that human connection. But another possibility is this feeling of fear and concern that it's going to come back, that we're going to be back in this position again, and that the kind of distancing measures continue onward, which for restaurants like Chase mentioned that have really small margins could be a death knell. Yeah,
I think the only, because in this scenario that people talk about, it's we're in lockdown and then someday we will not, very soon, hopefully we will not be in lockdown. But it's like Monica said, it's not really going to work like that. I mean, the only way that could happen is if tomorrow they announced we have a vaccine and we have enough of it for everybody. Short of that, coming out of lockdown is not, it's not a black or white thing, because if you just release everybody, then the virus will absolutely come back. So, we're in this new stay home order until May 4th. Even if the mayor or if the governor does not expand that, I'd be very surprised if it was something like, all right, you guys can go back to doing what you were doing. It would probably be more like, if you can maybe go visit a friend now, and then, sort of expand it in that way. And that's not exactly going to instill a lot of confidence in people. And for an economy that is based almost entirely on consumer confidence, I just don't see there being any way that we feel as confident as we used to in the next year, honestly. I mean, we might not be in lockdown for a year, but to get that confidence back is going to take a really long time.
Yeah, a lot of nightclubs are going to shut down and not come back. A lot of restaurants are going to not come back, and it's hard to tell, which ones that'll be. I think we assume that something will return in its place, but who knows what that is at this moment.
And it could be, chains. I think that's the big thing that a lot of people are talking about, is the big guys can survive this. The people who have hundreds of restaurants around the country and a cash reserve, and maybe slightly larger margins might be able to come back from this. It's the small ones that are going to have a little bit more difficulty.
I hear some people saying this time we're really going to reevaluate capitalism.
Well, I mean, I don't know about
not having a social safety net, not having universal health care, et cetera.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not gonna speak to whether it's going to be a referendum on capitalism or not. But it is interesting. I've been having conversations with people about things like TANF welfare benefits or SNAP benefits, and there has historically been a lot of stigma associated with those. And but we're seeing states like Florida, with pretty Republican governors, and red states now rolling back requirements that people have to be looking for a job while they're on these welfare requirements and things like that. And these are temporary measures, but it will be interesting to see if some of the kind of historical stigma that's been associated with safety net benefits starts to disappear as more and more people find themselves genuinely reliant on them to get through this.
Well, there is an organization that has been doing pretty well during these times, and we're going to talk about Amazon.com and some other aspects of tech-heavy Seattle in a tech-heavy pandemic when we come back with more of the Week in Review. Stay tuned. Okay, we're back on the Week in Review. I'm Bill Radke. I don't know what I'm talking on the air or not because I'm in my home. My laptop is propped up on a pillow and I'm on one knee. And I'm broadcasting remotely and reviewing the news of the week with GeekWire's Monica Nickelsburg, Crosscut's David Kroman, and Chase Burns from The Stranger. So I was talking about Amazon, of course, seeing a surge of orders, and Monica Nickelsburg, that's sort of your beat at GeekWire. What are you writing about relating to Amazon dealing with a surge of orders and also dealing with infections, for example, in their warehouses?
It's a pretty unprecedented situation. So, like you said, Amazon is fielding thousands more orders than they usually would be because lots of people are staying home and expecting a company with this kind of robust delivery infrastructure to deliver them the items that they need. At the same time, they've got these massive warehouses that employ hundreds of thousands of people around the country and an increasing number of coronavirus outbreaks in these warehouses. They're not saying exactly how many, but our reporting shows it's at least 30, likely quite a few more than that, facilities that have outbreaks of one or more employees who have the virus. And that's leading to a kind of buoying effect to the organized labor movement that's started at some of these facilities. And just like a feeling of, frustration, unrest among employees who are deemed essential and who are still coming into work and not always aware of whether their colleagues have this virus.
Chase, you've been writing a bit about in The Stranger about the reaction of between Amazon and its warehouse workers.
Yeah, so we did have those comments from Amazon General Counsel David Zapolsky that came out yesterday, where they were saying that the worker Christian Smalls, who was fired from an Amazon warehouse earlier this week, he called him not smart or articulate, and obviously those came out at a time when there was a lot of focus on Amazon and on their treatment of workers. And that was sort of timed with yesterday. You have Jeff Bezos giving, I think it was $100 million to food banks. And obviously that's a huge donation. And that's obviously something that we want to encourage, especially from people who can offer donations like that. But then when you see a donation like that and it's paired with these comments, it's hard to see that as something that isn't a PR move. And so it's tricky because, I'm also reliant on Amazon. I need certain packages that I can only get on Amazon at the moment. But you also have to navigate these oftentimes morally complex issues when you engage with Amazon.
Complexity is kind of the name of the game for them right now. And I could really see it going either way in terms of public perception of this company. Obviously, Zapolsky's comments yesterday did not help the situation. And the notes that leaked indicated that they kind of wanted to make this one employee the face of the organized labor movement. So that's certainly not going to help them. But at the same time, thousands of people are relying on them. And for more than a year now, federal regulators have been looking into whether they're too big and too powerful. But there's a case that could be made that only a company this huge and powerful with this, delivery and logistics horsepower could respond to a crisis like this. So it's going to be really interesting to see how they come out of it on the other side.
Do you think this is going to change the dynamics when it comes to Seattle or King County taxing Amazon and other big businesses?
Well, some would certainly like it to. Go ahead, David.
Well, yeah, I mean, Seattle City Council members Shama Sawant and Tammy Morales had been pushing for a tax on large companies, primarily Amazon, for a while now, and now they're kind of trying to move that effort up as a way to respond, bring in more revenue, because Seattle and Washington State are going to their budgets are going to be hugely impacted by this, and so this is kind of their response to that. I don't know. I haven't gotten a great temperature about what their colleagues are feeling, but I think it's going to be a big fight no matter what. And so the question isn't for me whether people in city government kind of support the idea of that, because we know they do, the majority of the city council at least, if not the mayor. But it's a huge political battle, and I think people are feeling kind of tired and just kind of doing a lot of trying to put out a lot of fires. So, whether or not it moves forward will be interesting to see. The conversations will start next week, though.
Right, and this tax was originally going to be proposed to start in 2021 and to fund affordable housing. It would tax the payroll at the companies in Seattle that have the biggest payroll expenses. But now they're looking at starting it in June, and for the initial year, using some of the revenue to provide relief to families that are most impacted by the pandemic.
Speaking of the tax situation, did you see that Washington State's Supreme Court today refused to hear, I guess in effect rejected Seattle's attempt to put an income tax on wealthy households? So I wonder if this will change the dynamics in that age-old fight in Washington State to allow an income tax when coffers are drained.
Yeah, I memean, we were talking earlier about kind of what some of the long-lasting effects of this will be, and one thing that I've been hearing from people is because Washington is going to get hugely hit by this, because I mean all states are, but Washington in particular, because their tax base is based mostly on business taxes and sales tax, and both of those are going to completely evaporate. And so what I've been hearing from people is, that I think it was that Rahm Emanuel line about, never waste a good crisis. So people who are trying to look at this and want to basically overhaul Washington's tax system and kind of use this as a catalyst for it. I was having those conversations yesterday. I think those conversations are now going to be different because they have essentially the Washington Supreme Court has made it so a progressive, graduated income tax is illegal. A flat income tax is still technically allowed, but that kind of defeats the purpose, I think, for a lot of people who are pushing for this in the first place.
Right. We've been talking about tech-heavy Seattle and Amazon. So it's just such a more digital life for some of us than it used to be. In fact, if you've been sheltering in place at home and you got a little time on your hands, you might know this little ditty. I can see Chase laughing on my laptop. This is the theme music to the video game Animal Crossing: New Horizons. Chase, heard of it?
Yeah, I have heard of it. And to be fair, a lot of people have heard of this game. It's a Nintendo Switch game. It's a franchise that's been around since the 2000s. It came out right during the pandemic, and basically what you do in the game is you have this island, and you go and you visit the island, and there's little animal creatures, and you build a house, and there's furniture, and your friends can move in. And I have to say that I've been only playing this game since it came out. My boyfriend has started playing it. The one friend we allow into our house that's in our germ circle is also playing it. So I'm really deep in it.
And this is a change for you, though, right? You used to at least feel conflicted about such gadgetry.
Yeah, so even though I'm a digital editor, at the beginning of the year, I was fully ready to essentially become digitally Amish. I was ready to get a flip phone. I went to a whole conference thing in downtown Seattle about how you can use a flip phone in Seattle and you can get rid of your smartphone. Obviously, I would use my smartphone at home. I really invested in VHS tapes for some reason. I was going analog. I'm not sure what was happening in me, but I was trying to break from the digital world. And ever since this pandemic happened, I have gone fully in. I'm only on my computer, I'm only on my phone, and I'm only playing video games. So that's where I'm at.
You've gone from Portlandia to Animal Crossing, just like that. Anybody else?
Not playing Animal Crossing, but I feel one of the reasons that it's appealing is you can create this perfect little world in the midst of this very imperfect world that we're living in right now. And I feel the same way about my little seedlings. I've been just smothering them with attention because I can.
You're not talking about your children, to be clear.
Nope, I do not have children. I just have plant babies.
Yes.
But you can just create the perfect conditions. It's just pleasant and nice. And I think that's part of the appeal of Animal Crossing, as I understand it.
Yeah, I've been planting seedlings in my Animal Crossing world.
Yeah, you don't have to choose. It's not one or the other.
True.
I also have seedlings, but I feel like I've invested too much emotional weight in them. So if they die, I'm not sure I'm prepared for that.
True. I've asked my seedlings to be quiet for the next 15 minutes or so before I can feed them lunch. You mentioned, Chase, feeling reliant on Amazon in some ways. This is a little different from video games, but I was thinking, and I want to ask you what you're reliant on, but I've heard chatter about people ordering. So it's okay to say, how dare you, business stay open for non-essential reasons, but we'll order non-essential things, and someone is packing up or acquiring or selling you those non-essential things. Are you all being Amish, ethically Amish, not just digitally Amish, but when it comes to being only essential yourself during lockdown?
Well,
well is the right answer to that question. Well,
I've been pretty good about it. I'm not buying a lot of random things that I don't need. There's two things that my household really wanted. One of them was paint. My boyfriend really wants to paint the entire house, and we don't have a car, and nowhere around us sells paint. And so I was like, you should go on Amazon and see if there's paint. There wasn't, and we didn't. But to tie it into Animal Crossing, I did buy additional controllers for my Switch through Amazon. I will make that confession. I think obviously this is, like we said, especially with Amazon, but with all this type of labor, it's sort of complicated because I don't know, people need to relax, and people also need need jobs? And is it better to not frequent those places that are offering those services? So I don't know. I don't know where I land on it.
Yeah, I would not advertise ethical purity here on my end either, but I guess my excuse is we closed on a new home days before the stay-home order went into effect, and so we ordered some stuff for our home, but we're trying to take a pause on that now.
And David,
our pantry is like really stocked right now, so I feel like we've done a little light hoarding. I'm not sure that I know we're not supposed to do that, but it's this game theory thing where you see everybody else hoarding, and it's hard to not do a little bit yourself. Right.
I think you're forgiven. I think pantries are a safe space. Okay, well, we're going to come back to. We're going to go from being ethical to being productive. Do you really need to be productive right now when the Week in Review continues? I'm Bill Radke, and I'm here virtually, remotely, digitally with the digital editor at The Stranger, Chase Burns, the staff reporter at Crosscut, David Kroman, and the civic editor at GeekWire, Monica Nickelsburg. And as we've been saying all hour, essentially, we hope you are well. We hope you and your loved ones are healthy and safe and that you can get by. We've talked about the economic, the financial pain of this outbreak and psychic pain and all of it. I do want to take a moment here toward the end of the show and just touch on something that Chase wrote about in The Stranger. Basically, Chase, that you don't have to be productive right now. On top of everything else, you don't have to be productive.
Yeah, I think it's really funny how we're trying to survive a historic pandemic right now, and people are out here being like, I really need to do that 30-day push-up challenge that my aunt sent me on Instagram. And we're in our phones, and we're seeing everyone else in our lives who are processing this and the way that they're trying to get through it. A lot of people have set goals for themselves, but I have to be honest, I'm working all the time, and then when I'm not working, I feel like I just roll out of bed. Maybe I put pants on. I try to clean my dishes. But I think in this moment, what we should all focus on is simplifying and just really trying to get through it, and that's enough. But yeah, a lot of people are out here trying to do push-up challenges.
Are the productive people making you feel guilty about not being productive and just playing Animal Crossing?
You know, they are. In the mornings, I'm always like, you know what? It would be a good idea to stretch. I'll do squats when I'm going to my microwave. And I'm like, this is a good idea. And then by 7 p.m., I'm like, I don't know where the day went. And then I'm just my brain has blacked out. And then I'm just back into gaming because I'm apparently a gamer now.
My sister is sewing masks. She had to get oil for a 1965 sewing machine that she doesn't think has ever seen oil before. But what about Monica and David? Are you being productive, purposely unproductive?
Well, I did get push-up challenged and I didn't do it, so not entirely productive. I think anyone who's being prescriptive about how you should respond to this is kind of missing the point. If I like to do tasks all the time because it helps me feel calm. So I guess I'm productive in that way. But if what feels right is to just relax and get through it, and that's what's going to be the thing that keeps you mentally healthy, then you should do that. I don't think anyone should be telling anyone else how to respond to this.
So you're lecturing the people who will tell other people how to respond to this, like you're doing it wrong. Wow, Monica, you're coming down.
That's true. I'm being prescriptive. Everyone stop giving advice.
Well, it's that experience, if you've ever had a protracted length of unemployment, as a lot of people I think right now are, but in other periods in my life, it's a very different feeling being unemployed than it is being retired or taking vacation. If you're retired, sure, I may feel a little bit more motivated to be productive all the time, but we are all basically collectively going through a period of unemployment, and that is a much different headspace than leisure. And so I don't know. I wouldn't expect anybody to come out and having written the modern day King Lear or whatever.
Right. I've seen other parents, as am I, posting about how overwhelming the the kid stuff is. I've got 3 kids across on the other side of this door, and I'm inundated with messages from my well-meaning school district that wants to tell us we're not doing nothing. You know, we're setting everything up, and here's 1,000 ideas for your kids of things they can do. But it's I know they don't mean me to take it as psychic overload, but it heightens my awareness. Like when I'm off being an absent parent because I'm working and my kids are being taken care of at school by people who know what they're doing, it all just seemed to work. And now I'm just hyper aware of everything I'm not doing for them. I have no idea what they're doing 20 feet away from me right now. But I did see that along the lines of what you're saying, the New York Times sends out a weekly list of recipe ideas. And I saw today's newsletter was titled, "Anything for Dinner is Okay." They've just given up.
It's a good, there are some silver linings to this. And one of them is I can feel patriotic for getting takeout.
Oh, yeah, right.
Very true.
Yeah, I think like this crisis we know that it demands big ideas. And so I think we we have this thing inside of us where we're like, I need to come up with this big solution for this big problem. But, progress isn't linear. And I would also encourage us all to realize that by hibernating, sometimes you can only come up with the best ideas by being a little lazy and hibernating for a bit. And so maybe when we all go into our holes and we do whatever thing we're doing in our apartments or wherever we're stuck, maybe we'll come up with better ideas by taking some time off.
Well, and sometimes I think when we try to be too productive, it can actually have negative repercussions. I sort of think some of the grocery store hoarding is, some of it's a legitimate fear and recommendations that you have 2 weeks supply, but I think there's also like a certain nesting quality to it. There's so many things that are out of our control, but the one thing we can control is we can go to the grocery store and we can buy a lot of stuff, and that feels productive. But by doing that, it also means that we don't have any more toilet paper. So, maybe it's a good thing if you just kind of stay home and play Animal Crossing.
Right. Are any of you trying to date right now? Because I'm glad I'm out of that world. Chase, I can see you reacting visually.
Oh, no, I'm in a relationship. I had to kick my boyfriend out to record in this bedroom. He's currently furloughed, and so I had to move him on out. I actually met him on Instagram, which is strange. So maybe I live more in the digital world than I realize.
A KUOW listener named Julie Brigham wrote and performed a song about dating in a pandemic, and I'm going to play a little snippet for you.
Hunker down in my own place. This fool wants to touch my face. Gave that man a 6-foot barrier, potential asymptomatic carrier. 6-foot hug, 6-foot hug. Love in the time of the novel bug. It's a 6-foot hug I like best of all. Ooh, it's public health protocol.
Julie sent me that link, and actually first she sent me a link of her just singing, and I wrote back and said, "You put some keys into that or something?" And she got, I think that's an ukulele. And the next verse goes, "He says, 'Marry me, honey, and we can make plans.' I tell the man to go and wash his hands. He brings me a rose, tries to treat me all nice. I make him sing happy birthday twice." So I thought, pretty good KUOW listener. Anything else making you smile, if that's allowed? Anything else making you smile before we go, team?
My dog and all of the other dogs that are being fostered right now, I think that's really sweet. I have some friends who are fostering a old pit bull, and I don't even think there are any more dogs that you can get even temporarily in Seattle because they've all found temporary or permanent homes.
Fostering, what's the situation? Why did somebody need a dog foster?
I think that the Humane Society has had to shut down because they're non-essential, and that the dogs are being fostered.
Oh, got it. Yeah, I would imagine.
Yeah, I feel like I've seen my wife more in the last month than I had for the many months combined before that, which, the circumstances are not great. And, we have some things that we're dealing with, but I think that people have found that when things externally are not great, they hold the things closer, the people and the things that they love closer to them. And I've certainly found that that's true.
I've been really enjoying seeing everyone's inside of their homes. I like going on CNN and seeing like, where does Anderson Cooper live? And seeing like, Bill, I can see inside your house right now. Like, that's cool.
I saw your post that you said Anderson Cooper looks like he lives on the set of Arsenic and Old Lace.
He does. And then someone DM'd me his address, and I was like, oh, okay. So watch out.
Yes, I advise you all to carefully position things behind you so that you look sophisticated, or whatever image you want to project in all these Zoom meetings. That's our time, everybody. Thanks a lot for being my panel of super journalists here and dialing in. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.
Chase Burns is digital editor at The Stranger. David Kroman is a staff reporter at Crosscut. Monica Nickelsburg is the civic editor at GeekWire. It's going to be another tough week next week. We know that. We hope you will join us all week on The Record and on The Week in Review. Today's show is produced by Sarah Leibovitz, and we'll get through this together. Have a good weekend. Hi, this is Bill Radke, host of KUOW's The Record and Week in Review. And I'm here at work. I'm not working from home. I'm working from work because this is where we broadcast. And we decided that bringing you breaking news, answering your questions, talking to your leaders at a time like this during this virus outbreak, that's an essential service. You rely on us, and we want to be here for you. I'm letting you know that it takes not just people, but money as well to cover breaking news. For producers and engineers, and these days bringing in safe food and disinfectant and all that, on top of the costs we already have, equipment and paying for network programming and all that, what you hear about at the pledge drive. I'm asking, would you please take a moment and donate something to KUOW? Give a little money so we can keep local independent journalism on the free airwaves. You rely on us, we'll be here for you. Thank you so much for your help.